With that, let me just kind of give you some background first on Smart Power, who we are and what we do. We started Smart Power about 15 years ago as a nonprofit marketing firm to get people to buy clean energy and to be energy efficient. So if you think about it, 15 years ago, people didn't do either. They weren't buying clean energy and they weren't being energy efficient. And so a bunch of private foundations said, you know what, let's start a nonprofit agency, a nonprofit marketing agency that basically helps the American consumer figure out how to buy solar power, helps them actually become energy efficient. Really, prior to that, for the past 30 years, we've been selling solar power because it's good for the environment, and it is good for the environment. But that actually hadn't sold a lot of solar. So we used a lot of consumer market research. We actually tried to get a lot of consumer market research and then actually put that into practice with the information we got, trying to break down the barriers that people said they had when they thought about buying solar, when they thought about buying wind, when they thought about buying any type of clean renewable energy. And actually ultimately put together campaigns, marketing campaigns, to get people to buy it. And we'll talk about that. Today, by the way, 15 years later actually, we operate mostly, we're still a nonprofit, but you really think of us as a for-profit entity. Most of our work is fee-for-service work. We get hired by companies to come in, renewable energy companies, by energy efficiency companies to come in and actually help people buy their products. And it's really been quite exciting to actually see how the market has grown. The success of the program and the organization has worked like that. Our clients today are everything from utility companies to private companies. And that's, quite frankly, probably enough about Smart Power. But I could go on and on if you want. Really, what I want to talk about today is Solarize. And Solarize, how many here are familiar with the Solarize program in some form or other? All right, not as many as I thought, so I won't bore too many of you. But really, we'll talk about Solarize, which is a residential solar program. And it has been remarkably successful in actually getting people to buy solar for their homes. What we need with Solarize, and what we have lost and not had, what we have not had traditionally in solar, has been a trusted brand. So if you think about any consumer product that's out there, Coca-Cola, Nike, Google, these become trusted brands. And so you can actually say the name and people automatically know what you're talking about. They know whether to buy it or not. And in solar, we have not had that trusted brand. And it's really hard actually to think of a trusted brand, quite frankly, in energy. Case in point, there's not a lot of Americans who could tell you the name of their hot water heater. And yet, most American homeowners have hot water heaters. So we don't have a lot of trusted brands in the energy industry. As an aside, by the way, most Americans don't deal with energy. That's one of the challenges we have. We never deal with energy here in the United States. The only time we actually deal with energy is at the gas station. And that's why gas prices become such a barometer. So gas prices go up, solar sales go up. It doesn't really make sense, but they do. And so that's because that's the time we deal with energy. And so keeping in mind that, you know, all the people we deal with, they don't deal with energy. When I bought my house, it came with energy, right? I flicked the switch, how great was that? So I go in there trying to sell somebody solar, and they're like, well, you don't understand, my house already has energy, I don't need it. My office building already has energy, I'm fine. I don't need to spend another $30,000 on that particular product. So we have to figure out how to actually get them to want to buy solar. With lack of a trusted brand, we actually need to figure out who are the trusted friends. We actually have to then create a on-the-ground marketing campaign that actually gets that message out. Solarize is that. And so what that image you see up there is the report that we actually just put out last week with the U.S. Department of Energy, with Yale University, with Duke University, and the Connecticut Green Bank, that actually can be used by every single community in this country to create their own Solarize campaign. And I'll walk through the mechanics of a Solarize campaign, but this guidebook and this study basically allows every community to do it on their own. And that really is where we'll get the real kind of uplift on this program. All right. So keep this in mind. Think about it this way. When I talk about solar, when I talk about Solarize, these products up here all have something in common. Coca-Cola, the hairbrush, the vacuum cleaner, and Tupperware. And in the middle, of course, you see solar. Any idea what any of these products all have in mind, or all have in common? All right, I'll tell you. Every single one of these products made it into the marketplace, except for one of them. Every single one of these products made it into the marketplace through an on-the-ground outreach campaign. And had it not been for an on-the-ground outreach campaign, you would not now buy these products in Walgreens and CVS and Walmart and every consumer store that you go into. Specifically, Coca-Cola was actually invented back in the 1800s, and it was actually made as an elixir to cure your health. And he actually went literally door to door to drugstores around the country trying to get them to sell his magic elixir. And they did, and people drank it and said, oh, it is pretty magic. Probably because of the cocaine that was in it, but it was pretty magic. And so they then started stocking Coca-Cola in their stores. The hairbrush, who here remembers the Fuller Brush Man? Right, some of us, okay. So there used to literally be men that would go door to door selling hairbrushes to the women in the house. Imagine that. And that was the Fuller Brush Man. And then there used to be vacuum cleaner salesmen. And same thing, vacuum cleaner salesmen would literally go door to door selling vacuum cleaners. Consider the fact, by the way, that in the days of vacuum cleaner salesmen, it was always the woman in the house. And something to keep in mind, by the way, even today when selling solar, 75% of American households, the female runs the household. Okay, so though she may not be working in the house, she is running the house. So she is actually the one we need to talk to. Same with vacuum cleaners. The vacuum cleaner salesman would show up, he'd throw dirt on the floor. Well, first she would say, by the way, I don't need a vacuum cleaner, I have this wonderful broom, and it's been working great. And he said, yeah, let me show you this. He'd throw dirt on the floor, he'd vacuum it up, and she'd say, well, actually, I think I need a vacuum cleaner. And now, you literally can walk into CVS and get a vacuum cleaner. You can go to Walgreens and get a vacuum cleaner. And same with Tupperware. Who remembers Tupperware parties? My mother actually hosted a Tupperware party for a while. And Tupperware actually had a problem because people didn't understand actually how to close the lids. That in fact, you had to burp the lid, if you will, so that they could be airtight. And people didn't know how to do that. And so the way to do it was peer-to-peer, friend-to-friend, neighbor-to-neighbor. Hosting parties in your living room, getting people to actually kick the tires, if you will, figure out how these Tupperware plastic bowls actually worked. And actually it took off, it worked. And you can walk into any grocery store today and buy not brand name Tupperware, but any plasticware for your kitchen. And it really has worked. Solar is not there yet, but that is really what we're doing. And the New York Times actually called it themselves. They actually said, solar industry borrows a page in a party from Tupperware. And that's what Solarize is. Just as Tupperware failed to fly off the shelves without a salesperson showing customers how to work the airtight seal, which inspired the party plan model, solar panels often require demonstration and explanation to make the sale. And so, and by the way, and keep this in mind, when I'm talking about solar, whatever products you're working on, if you're talking about electric vehicles, if you're talking about water or actually saving water, if you're talking about anything connected with energy, it's really hard for the American consumer to get their hands around it. So this Tupperware party model, the peer-to-peer, friend-to-friend, neighbor-to-neighbor, giving people a chance to kick the tires is really what is needed, and Solarize is that. We actually at Smart Power started out, we actually did a tremendous amount of television ads around solar, thinking this is how one gets a message across to a broad audience. And it is how one gets a message to a broad audience. It's actually a very expensive way to get a message to a broad audience. But all it does, specifically with solar, all television ads will do will be to raise the awareness of solar. And solar in this country has a very high awareness level. About 80% of Americans, 85% of Americans are aware of solar. So you can kind of on the margins raise the awareness somewhat more, but it's really hard to even get it more than that. What it doesn't do is actually cause them to take an action. And that's really what we're here for, is actually to get people to take an action, to take one energy action, buy solar. So you run a 30-second television commercial, you will raise awareness, but awareness is already raised, but they will not take that action because they don't know how to buy solar. It's really hard to buy solar in this country. You know, the number one reason people don't buy solar is because they don't think it works. Imagine that. Today in this country, Americans don't think solar power is strong enough to power their lifestyle. The number 2 reason is they don't know where to buy it. You don't walk into Walmart and buy solar. You don't walk into CVS and buy solar. And number 3, they actually just think it's not the cost, it's actually the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of buying solar, as in, I just don't have the time for all of this. It's kind of like, it's not my lifestyle. I get if I buy solar, I have to, eat vegan, and I have to wear hemp, I gotta do this whole thing, and that's not me. We've basically made it so that if you wanted to buy solar, you have to change your entire lifestyle. By the way, the flip side of that, and the real point of good marketing, is whatever consumer product you sell fits in with your lifestyle. And it fits in with your lifestyle because you are cool, you are hip, you're happening, you're the person that actually has all the cool stuff. And so what we really have to do is actually make it that. We have to say, no, solar, by the way, it's really easy to buy. It really does, first, it really does work. It's really easy to buy, and it fits right in with your lifestyle. And the Tupperware Party allows that to happen. And then what we also know, and what our study shows, and what this guide shows, and what this program that we've been doing, really under DOE with Yale and Duke for the past 3 years, has been tracking Solarize campaigns, specifically in Connecticut, but then also in other states like South Carolina and Pennsylvania and Rhode Island, but specifically in Connecticut. Why does it work? Why is it that people are buying solar peer-to-peer, neighbor-to-neighbor, friend-to-friend? And it really is because it's this peer effect. There is a contagious nature when your friends do something. And we know that we know that is true in fashion, because when your friends wear something, you are more likely to wear it. When the trends come from California and head east, we know that's what is happening when the fashion trends. We know it's true in technology. And now we also know it's true in solar. That in fact, the more friends who are using solar beget more friends. There used to be a shampoo commercial that said, then I told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. And now we know that it is really true with solar. But it really takes an effort. It takes a solarized effort. To create the tipping point, it is simply you start really with the people who have solar. They become kind of our solar ambassadors. They become the leaders. And if there's one common trait among people who own solar, it's that they love to brag about owning solar. They're very proud of it. And so let's tap into that. So we will go into our community, and we'll almost literally knock on their door first and say, hey, can we actually host a party at your house? Can we invite 10 of your friends and neighbors, and can we show them how your solar works? Can you invite your finance person? Can you invite the guy who actually put them on the roof? Can you show us your bill? And they're more than happy to do that. And we'll pay for the coffee and donuts or whatever it is, and we'll have a little Tupperware party for your solar. You invite community stakeholders, those stakeholders, they build out, and basically you wind up with solar in that community multiplying constantly. Single most important factor driving a given house installed to install solar is peer influence. In this, I'm going to give you just kind of the quick takeaways right away, which peer influence is the single most compelling factor for people to install solar. So think about that. It's not cost. It's not even does it work. It's actually just that other people are doing it, which is pretty amazing. And so that is really what we have to keep doing. We have to really, if you will, solarize this nation. The installation of one additional solar rooftop project within the past 6 months in a community increased the average number of installations within a half-mile radius by almost 1/2. It just is contagious, and it just keeps happening. And so it really does work. Let me just talk really kind of specifically about what Solarize is. All right. Solarize is an on-the-ground outreach campaign that aims to leverage social interactions to encourage people to actually buy solar. Now in the process, we will educate them about solar, but keep in mind, we need them to buy it. We're not doing this just for our own health. We're not doing this just to be good people. At the end of the day, we are doing this to build the solar industry. And if we don't, then we fail in our job. So we need people to buy this. And we need them to buy it because we want to build the industry. We need them to buy it because we believe that solar is a key component to mitigating climate change. I don't need people who buy solar to believe that, by the way. And that's kind of a real key takeaway, too. They can believe whatever they want. They just need to actually buy solar. And that's kind of interesting, too. For too long, we've tried to impose our own belief system on them. And that's not how it should work. Think about it this way. When you buy any consumer product, you are automatically making quick decisions and actually value-based decisions on every product you buy. And American people, we buy things for two reasons. We buy things because we want them, and we buy things because we need them. And as Americans, we buy them in that order. So we are more likely to buy things we want before we buy things we need. Think about that. And so when you buy things, and by the way, in that, no one is saying, oh, and I buy things for the environment. It's like, no, you buy things because you want them, and you buy things because you want them. So you go to the store to buy soap because you need soap. And at that moment that you're buying soap, you make a value-based decision. And you may not even know you're making a value-based decision, but you make a value-based decision. And you go to this grocery store, there's a wall of soap, and that value-based decision happens because you're looking and you're like, oh, I'll buy, this soap is on sale, or I have a coupon for that soap, or this soap is in a brick and I need to buy a lot of soap. Most Americans, the number one value Americans buy ascribe when they actually buy soap is because that's the soap I always buy, which is kind of interesting too. So you're making these value-based decisions. You may, by the way, also say, oh, I'm going to buy this soap because it has oatmeal and honey, and I guess it's going to be good for the environment. But it's your own value-based decision, and you're allowed to make that value-based decision. We need to do that for American consumers on solar. Allow them to make their decision. So Solarize allows them to do that. But what we do is we create this on-the-ground community campaign. My background, actually, before doing anything really in the environment or solar energy, was actually in politics, was in running political campaigns. And all Solarize is a political campaign for solar power. Because whether you're running for dog catcher or President of the United States, it starts with an on-the-ground outreach campaign where you have to meet people peer-to-peer, friend-to-friend, neighbor-to-neighbor. You are more likely to vote for somebody for school committee if a friend of yours says, will you vote for my friend for school committee? You're really likely to vote for them if they are your friend. But basically the way political campaigns work is you get your friends to tell their friends to tell their friends. And you kind of draw these circles out of friends of friends of friends. And that's what this is. And you have to kind of just get in front of as many people as possible. So it's peer-to-peer outreach. We're working then with true believers, the solar ambassadors, those who own solar, those who actually really want other people to buy solar. And then we're working within the community meetings and the community organizations within these towns. And we're going, in Connecticut specifically, we were going city by city and town by town. That is somewhat unique to New England and Connecticut. And we're doing a campaign here in Southern California. And it's a little different because it's not as clean cut in other parts of the country as it is, say, in Connecticut, where you have little hamlets and little New England towns. But in Connecticut, it was, little towns, little hamlets, and then bigger cities as well. But we're working through, and it doesn't really matter, by the way, whether you're working cities or towns, or if you're working in what we as Americans ascribe as our own communities. And keep that in mind, that in whatever you're working in, people live in community. Okay, now many times that's place-based, so we say, I live in X town, but truthfully, we all live in community at work, and we probably spend more time at work than we do at home. So your work is a community, and your workplace community could solarize, and we have actually done, and we do, solarize campaigns within major businesses to actually say this entire business could now solarize. All the people that work here can actually be eligible for the benefits of solarizing through this company. So keep that in mind about the community-based approach here. It is designed to get customers, to reduce the acquisition costs for customers as well. So ultimately, while we need people to buy, what we're actually also doing is reducing the acquisition costs of solar. Okay? And solar is expensive. There are two reasons why it's expensive, and the costs, as you know, are coming way down. But obviously the hardware had traditionally been very expensive. It's now coming way down. And now really the soft costs are really kind of a barrier for the consumer. The soft costs, the cost of getting that solar installer on the roof to put the solar up. And so can we reduce that soft cost? And in fact, through Solarize, we've shown that we can, and I'll show you that in a little bit. And that actually then brings the entire cost down for people. Is any of this making sense? Questions, comments, thoughts? I'll keep on going. Let's start this from the beginning then. About 3 years ago, we launched in 4 communities in Connecticut. And then we actually took that now to over 70 communities, okay, just in the state of Connecticut. We've also been in North Carolina, South Carolina, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and California. And we work through, in these communities, we will work through the different community groups, the local media, the social media, city and town leaders, and all to increase solar power, solar, but also to give these communities kind of a leadership by example platform. Again, there's no trusted brand. So when the mayor of your town says, hey, we're going to solarize this town of Portsmouth, Connecticut, that means something. When the city council passes a resolution in New Haven, Connecticut, and says, we're going to solarize New Haven, that means something. And so it's really important that you actually have leadership from the top, you have buy-in from the top. And then we host various events and work through all of the local organizations. So what Solarize is not is a canvassing campaign going door to door and asking people to buy solar. Now, we could go door to door and ask people to buy solar, and some people do. We traditionally do not, and we don't for 2 reasons. One is nobody's home, so there's that. You know, most people are working during the day, so nobody's home. The second is you're not gonna buy a $15,000 or $20,000, $25,000 product from a college kid knocking on your door in the middle of the afternoon. Okay, the whole point of Solarize is that this is a peer-to-peer interaction. You are actually buying this big purchase because somebody you know, somebody you trust, a peer of yours, is actually influencing your decision. And so, and by the way, when I say a peer of yours, it can be a peer once or twice removed. So you don't need to know him or her personally, but they are in your sphere. So they are in or of your community. So people that we hire to run our Solarize campaigns are only of the community. So we hire from these states, from these towns. And those people, they're kind of, they know, if you will, where all the bodies are buried. They know when the big parades are. They know when the big town and community events are. They know, if they don't know you personally, they could tell you, oh yeah, well I live, 8 blocks down that way to the left, and it's like, oh, okay, so you're kind of my community. And you think this solar stuff really works? Like, oh, it really works. And actually, your neighbor 3 doors down, he just bought it. And it's like, you're kidding me, I didn't know that. And so you kind of are able to have this conversation with a peer in that way. To start it off, we do 2 things. We RFP, we do a request for proposal, to local solar installers. And so the reason we do this is because there's, and specifically in Connecticut, but any state, there are a large number of local solar installers. And we encourage that, and it's great. The problem is, multiple choice really confuses American consumers, and myself included. But so there is a reason why we have Coke and Pepsi and McDonald's and Burger King. There's only so many choices the American consumer can keep in mind. And it has been a significant barrier in solar, okay? That in fact, when you have 10 solar installers coming to your house or emailing you and saying, hey, I can give you a better price, I can give you a better price, how about I give you this price? You're basically saying, never mind. The best way to get an American, let's say the best way to do nothing is to give an American a list of 10 things to do. And it's like, that's what happens. And yet we want and we really need the competition in the marketplace. So we do a request for proposals. And we say, okay, We are going to do a Solarize campaign in the city of New Haven. It's going to be supported by the mayor. It's going to be supported by the city council. Smart Power is going to be working on the ground with local community managers, community outreach managers, to market this entire campaign through all the local organizations. And we collectively, Smart Power, the Connecticut Green Bank, and the local green team through New Haven, are looking for proposals from local solar installers. And what we want to see in that proposal is your best price, and we want to see kind of how you're going to help us market this campaign, how you actually going to get on the ground and get people to buy solar. It's actually a very quick, easy proposal to do. And we get the proposals in, and then we actually interview the installers together. And it's great. The installers love it because then we pick one installer. You ensure competition, and then you have one installer for what winds up to be a 16 to 20 week campaign through Solarize. Keep in mind, these are only 16 to 20 week campaigns, so 4 to 5 month campaigns. But if you're that local solar installer that wins that RFP, this is magic. I mean, basically, you can make your entire year through one Solarize campaign. And so we then will RFP the installer. And we also, by the way, RFP the communities, because there's nothing worse, and we've done it, there's nothing worse than working with a community that doesn't want to solarize. And they're out there. And some communities, they're just not right for it. Some communities, by the way, it's not even a political thing. It's just that there just isn't kind of the infrastructure within the community to make it happen. And by that, I mean you really want to make sure that these communities have kind of communications networks, as in, how are we going to get this message out? Is there a local newspaper? Are there local listservs we can work through? Are there local Rotary clubs and Lions clubs? Are there local organizations? What's the faith-based community like in this community? That type of thing. And you really don't want to impose yourself on a community if they don't want it. So we RFP the communities. Mostly what that does is it really gets them to be bought in from the beginning. So we RFP communities, we RFP the installers, and then we're off to the races. As I said, it lasts about 20 weeks, 16 to 20 weeks. We then, and over this course of this study that we've done with DOE, we've actually tested different models to this to actually see, could we add multiple installers and see how these numbers work? As in, some folks, we got feedback from folks and saying, you know, I get that you're doing the RFPs on the installers, and that's where the competition happens, but they would prefer to see competition among the installers during the campaign. So we actually did what we called Solarize Choice. We actually added multiple installers, 2 or 3 installers. And not surprisingly, the numbers didn't come in as strong as the regular what we call Solarize Classic. So it can be done. You still see the uptick, but the numbers weren't as strong. We also then said, and this is very interesting, that in the 20-week campaign, the biggest time that you get for the signups are in the first 4 weeks of the campaign and in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. So really, my brilliance, I said, well, wait a minute, let's just make this a 6-week campaign. Like, forget about it, let's 6-week campaign, and let's just keep doing more. And so we call that Solarize Express, to actually see, could we actually just multiply our efforts by doing shorter campaigns. You got an uptick, but actually you didn't have enough time for actually the local media and kind of the local power brokers, if you will, to do enough talking about the campaign to make it work. And then ultimately Solarize Classic, which is really what I've been talking about. But it's really been very interesting to kind of play around with different levers on this thing to actually see kind of what really works and what doesn't work. And what we've found is that traditionally it's about a 16 to 20 week campaign, one solar installer, an RFP town. And that is what really gets people engaged and invigorated. And this is kind of the proof. What you can see, and it's really kind of interesting because you have that hockey stick is really just everything during the campaign. You'll see it just kind of spikes. And I won't go too deep into this, but there's 2 things to see here. Every Solarize campaign just spikes. But more interesting, and those of you who are solar installers yourselves or deal with them regularly will know the issue they always have is there persistence after this goes away? Will people keep buying solar? And actually, in every single case, there continues to be persistence. So once that 20-week campaign is over, people are still buying solar. And that is then the contagious nature of solar. That's what we continue to see. That in fact, we now then, in every single community, double, triple, in some cases we've quintupled the amount of solar in these communities in 20 weeks. And then that contagious nature just keeps going on and on and on. And so people just continue to buy it. When the 20-week campaign is over, by the way, you then have all these other installers, they come right back into that community and start picking up right away. And it's really fascinating because they then, and they're doing that in, we're in 70 different communities doing campaigns. They're running in each other right as these campaigns end. So they're doing incredible work. At the end of the day, really what we're looking at is that in about 3 years, we did $100 million of residential rooftop on an investment of about $3.5 million. Now, I just tell you, $3.5 million in television ads would get you about 2 weeks in Connecticut. In parts of Connecticut, it would get you maybe a day if you're closer to New York. So, and it wouldn't get you $100 million of installed solar. 3,500 residential homes, and specifically just in Connecticut, 2,300 residential homes, which is significant. 28 megawatts installed, 18 specifically in Connecticut. 25,000 metric tons, and then you can kind of do the environmental benefits as well. 18 megawatts in Connecticut of residential rooftop, that actually represents, if that were a large-scale, utility-scale solar, it would be the largest solar array in all of New England. And it was built, if you will, in less time than any utility could actually build it. It's phenomenal how successful this has been. And this is, as I say, this is not me tooting our own horn. This is actually from Yale and Duke, and this is Department of Energy saying this is how it happened. And so it really does work. What happens when people are telling their friends and neighbors to buy solar, they do it. And if you think about consumer purchases you make, and when you hear about consumer purchases and then say, oh, I really want to get that, they usually come from friends and neighbors. You can see things on TV, but look at your own iPhone. Look at your apps. And the apps that you have that you really kind of like, you probably heard from someone at work that said, hey, you got to have Waze, you got to do this, you got to get that. And it's like, oh yeah, so you do. And that's word of mouth. And so it really does work. So, does that all make sense? Let me just stop here for questions. And I'm going to go deeper on stuff. But questions, thoughts, comments? Yes?
Brian, have you ever run into a situation where you've got pushback from installers about saying, how can you say this town now is devoted to one provider for the next 20 weeks? I mean, presumably somebody else can still be outside of solar, but have you run into that?
A pushback from an installer? Yeah. So yes. But what's really important is that the Solarize campaign involves, it doesn't happen in a silo. So we are doing it with all of the installers. I should say this. We do it with installers, 8 or 10 installers specifically in Connecticut, who have actually raised their hand and said, we want to be part of Solarize. And specifically, we ultimately but we all agreed that if they wanted to do it, they needed to put skin in the game just to start. So they actually wrote a check, each one of them say, I want to be in it for $1,000. And that meant they were simply agreeing to be a Solarize player. And that meant they were going to they were going to get a Solarize community in one of these 3 years, so that they would always get their $1,000 back, which is so a fair bet. But that actually allowed them to say, okay, this all works for us. We can actually make this work. And it's really important that you develop a very strong relationship with the solar installers, because we're very sensitive. They are working on the margins in a real emerging industry, and everything falls on them. And if we run around saying, hey, wait, we're doing all this great work for you, you guys should just really be on your knees thanking us, it's like, well, no, thank you, because quite frankly, they have the hard job. And we can really mess them up. And quite frankly, early on, we messed them up because we gave them too much work. And so you have to really be careful. And it was funny, our campaign in North Carolina, we had that exact problem. They were like, you know, hold back, like this is not helpful, because now I'm the guy, they are on the front lines, and they're the guy that looks like the jerk, because now they have homeowners that are saying, wait, I don't get my solar for how many years? Like, well, I got 2 guys, what am I gonna do? Like, you know, so you really have to plot it out and be careful with your installers. Anybody else? Yeah.
My organization has used Peertopeer and their house parties for energy efficiency.
Yeah.
Some good success. We were finding that even when we had really good incentives, it was still really difficult to get into low and moderate communities. Explain the savings, explain what the once that we gained traction at work, but without those incentives, it just won't.
Yeah.
Does Solarize, how does Solarize get into low and moderate?
That's a great question. And it's, so we're actually working on a separate program with JP Morgan Chase, specifically on this. And here's how it's played out with LMI, low to moderate income communities here in Connecticut, and really for the past 3 years, which is, and in this program specifically, these numbers included economically stressed communities throughout Connecticut. So we're not just talking about kind of Greenwich. We're not just talking about the wealthy communities. And we also message test a lot of this, and that's an important piece to understand. When you're going into a community that is economically stressed, low to moderate income people, poor people don't think they're poor, so don't talk to them like they're poor, right? So it's very interesting, and there's you will have seen, we've seen a lot of folks walk into communities and just talk different to people. So if you're going to sell solar one way on an economic basis, do it straight across the board. Everybody wants to save money, and actually, really, a lot of people, very wealthy people, will say, "Hey, I'm really not that wealthy." As well will very poor people. But they won't say, hey, I'm very poor. They'll let them make that decision. You don't make that decision for them, which is very interesting. So you actually, messaging becomes very important. But that said, the 2 big barriers, major barriers we see for LMI community are that getting a loan for solar, for residential solar, has been really exciting for a lot of homeowners, and it's really helped the market. So you can get a 0 down loan, which is a game changer. You can get a 0 down loan that becomes cash positive really within months after you're getting solar. As in, cash positive meaning what you pay for your loan combined with what you're paying your utility bill is cheaper than what you were just paying for your utility bill. So technically, it's not even a loan, actually. It's just an investment in your house. That is what we want LMI homeowners to have, because that actually is the biggest advantage to them. LMI homeowners get the biggest advantage from solar. So we want them to have this. The problem is, these 0 down loans require a high FICO score. And that's the credit score. They require the high credit score, and they require collateral, most likely your house. Sorry, and there's 2 issues with that, though. One is, if they have high FICO score, LMI folks or communities were really the hardest hit during the crash, and they're basically saying, look, I was fooled once, I'm not going to be fooled twice. I'm not going to do that. I don't even want you to look at my credit score. Forget about it. And their home itself, while it might be a perfectly fine house, just doesn't have enough equity in it. And so they're just kind of, they're out of the running. With JP Morgan Chase, we're actually having this very interesting conversation, because JP Morgan Chase and, escaping my name, it's escaping me right now, but this other bank we're working with basically said, look, can we create a 0 down loan that doesn't require a FICO score? And then could we create a loan loss reserve fund that actually just, basically sits there, and that's the collateral we're going against. Can we just do that? And JP Morgan Chase said, actually, yes, we'd be interested in that if other folks would actually create that actual product, that 0 down product. So that's what we're really working on, and it's really very exciting if we can actually pull it off. So that's what we see as a big issue.
My that, bring down the overall price.
Yes, but it's ultimately, you can bring down the price, but you're still talking about a major purchase. And what we haven't done yet is make it as clean a purchase as a car. And that's really what we want to do. So the goal is, and we said this to JP Morgan Chase, is, you know, the American Automobile Association has been able to, or car manufacturers have been able to sell cars to almost any demographic group in this country. How can we do that? And that's really the model. So, yeah.
We've been supporting directly the solar co-op model, which is
Yeah.
very similar, although I think in that case they don't owners actually just really are.
Yep.
So really two questions. One, is anyone out there doing anything on Solarize or solar plus storage or solar plus EV, because it's still kind of stuck in just solar PV only? And the second is, in any of these campaigns, do you get government support financially to do some of the community outreach work? In our case, we were putting up 4,000 to 8,000 per neighborhood campaigns, kind of buy banners and kind of prep
Yeah.
for those local parties, and then kind of back down after you guys have one of RFPs.
So let me answer the second question first, because, and if folks in here, basically, it was kind of the financing, how do you actually fund these campaigns? And it was very interesting. When we started Solarize in Connecticut, in essence, it was entirely underwritten by two entities, the Connecticut Green Bank and the US Department of Energy. And they basically said, we want to do this here in Connecticut to actually figure out if it can work. And in fact, in essence, hired Smart Power to pull it together to do it. And it was great. I mean, it worked. But the Connecticut Green Bank specifically said that their goal, in addition to dropping the soft costs, in addition to increased solar installations, was actually to see if it could become so valuable a campaign that the solar installers themselves would want to fund it. And so, and what we also knew in Connecticut, and actually so many cities and towns across the country, they don't have cash to do this. And it's hard to actually draw these cities and towns to say, okay, so if you give me $5,000 to market this solar campaign, the benefit back to you is going to be in X, Y, and Z. Now, it's somewhat easier when it's an energy efficiency campaign where you can say, hey, your light bulbs will reduce this and that type of thing. But with residential solar, it's a tougher slog. And then kind of working through the bureaucracy of these towns can get really challenging. And so we got funding from the Green Bank and DOE. And ultimately what happened, and it was very exciting because you then saw it all worked. And then the solar installer said, okay, so wait a minute. We would be interested in a transition. We could actually do this to drop the payments to Smart Power from the Green Bank, and we as the solar installers will pick up those payments and to Smart Power. But they wanted, and it was interesting, they wanted Smart Power in that game still. We were actually worried like, uh-oh, we're gonna be cut out of this thing. But they were like, no, because it benefits them to not be selling their own products, basically. To have an independent third party say, hey, no, wait, this is the way to do it. So it was very interesting. So that's the program we started. The actual Green Bank program money dropped and actually stopped. And then the payments from the installers started. The problem was actually that the solar installers, they do run on such a margin, such a slim margin, that there are two things. We could either get paid by leads or signed contracts. Now, signed contracts, once the contract is signed, they'll pay a lot. But it can still take 2 or 3 months to actually get that signed contract. And the campaign needs to keep happening. And so then they were like, well, why don't we pay you for leads? And it's like, okay, we could do that. We'll take less money for leads, but that still then puts that installer in the position of having to then go market to that lead. And actually kind of, so it creates this little bump that we hadn't really thought through. So actually we had a quick solution though, which was and you do with these campaigns, think about who's making money. It's like, okay, well actually who's gonna benefit from this thing? And the winners, obviously, the homeowners, the winners are the communities. But by the way, the financing guys are going to make a lot of money at this thing. So do they want to see this still going on? And the financing guys like, we sure do. Can we underwrite this thing? So actually, they then picked up the role of the green bank. And with the financing piece, it's interesting because by law, we're not allowed to advocate one financing company over another. So all they're counting on is actually getting kind of whatever sifts down anyway. But it always works for them. They always get theirs. So the more financing companies that are out there, the better off it is. And that's what's really exciting with financing, because then it's like, oh, right. Now that you have independent financing companies or just big banks getting into this thing, you start seeing that they're like, yeah, this is like selling car loans. So people want solar, it's like, great. And these solar installers, the little mom and pop solar installers are able to say, I can get you this solar in your house and I can do it zero down. Just like they got GMAC for the local, car guy. They say, I can finance that thing for you. Smart Power doesn't say, we don't even talk about it. We don't have to mention anybody by name, but say that if you want to finance it, you certainly can. And the state, by the way, also has a financing mechanism too, which is very interesting. First question on battery storage, we haven't seen it. We anticipate it's going to come up a lot here in California. And then we also anticipate that it'll be a big play in the next 3 to 5 years. And that it'll be a game changer for really solar in every component of solar, community solar, Solarize, and then also just utility scale solar. Yeah.
How much of is there friction in the system because potential clients in the Solarize campaign just don't want to deal with the government, with the utility, with all those hassles?
Yeah. As in the client being the homeowner, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Well, and it kind of goes to the messaging of it, which is a lot of people will buy solar for a lot of those reasons. We actually did a great campaign in Arizona, and it was fascinating because Arizona is a desert. So you would think they would have a lot of solar. But, when we started, and it was amazing, you fly into Phoenix, and you're almost blinded by the reflection of the swimming pools, not of the solar. And it's like, this is a very odd picture because you got more swimming pools than solar, and you live in a desert. And so, so our first slogan was actually more solar than swimming pools. But that didn't work, and we tested it, and it was, the shaming thing never works. And so, at least in energy. But in Arizona is a very, it's a political hotspot, and it's a very conservative state on energy in general. Very strong utility control. The slogan we wound up with was "Solar makes sense." And the beauty of that is that it allowed everybody individually to determine for themselves what sense it made. Now, it happened that actually in Arizona, for a lot of people, the sense was, I can actually get away from my utility. That's because they wanted to break away from their utility. But it also made financial sense. Then there's a component that said, well, actually, this makes environmental sense. I want to do this. And so you just kind of allowed, and some people was like, it makes sense because my neighbor did it. It makes sense because I think it's a cool gadget. Like you kind of, it allowed people to make their own decision with it. And it was really exciting because we then had Tea Party mayors throughout Arizona who we would first approach for this, and they were like, no, I'm not interested, no way, not going to happen. That then the next town over would do it, and then they'd say, well, actually, let's try it here. And they then became huge believers, huge believers. And it's really exciting because you drive through kind of greater Phoenix, and every time you go into, it was called the Arizona Solar Challenge, there are now street signs that say, this town won the Arizona Solar Challenge. And the challenge was actually to get 10% of homes in a town to buy residential solar, and every single town got over 20% of their homes to buy it. It's pretty amazing. The other thing that's interesting, as an aside, just about Arizona, and I know I'm already running out of time, but just an aside, the utilities there, this is going now back 7 years ago, they had they wanted to, they had a mandate to do solar hot water. And so they had been told by their utility commission to do solar hot water, and so they did it. millions of dollars of TV ads about solar hot water. And they couldn't figure it out that nobody bought solar hot water heaters. And so, and this is before we started our solar campaign, so they had called us and said, can you help us figure out why no one's buying solar hot water heaters? So I could have done it on the phone, but it was February, and I live in Washington, so I went to Phoenix. And but sat down with them, and it's like, well, here's the deal, okay? A hot water heater is a crisis purchase. You don't see an ad on TV and want to, hey, honey, tomorrow let's go buy a new hot water heater. Like, you just never do it. It's a crisis purchase. It never is convenient when it breaks. And when it does, you call the plumber, and at that moment, that plumber is the most trusted person in your life. And you're just like, fix this, make it go away, and like, I need hot water. And your plumber will say, no problem, I can do it. I've got a couple of questions. What one do you want me to replace it with? I can put in a more expensive one, I can put in the same type of one, I can put in a cheaper one, I could put in a solar one. And the homeowner, through no fault of their own, has no clue, right? So she says, well, I don't know, what one do you think? And if the plumber says, well, if it were me, I'd put in a solar hot water one, you're 70% more likely to buy a solar hot water heater. So bless you. So I'll get you, so hang on, but so the solution on solar hot water heaters was not a TV commercial. It was actually working with the 93 plumbers in Greater Phoenix, there are 93 plumbers in Greater Phoenix, and incentivize them, give them $100 for every solar hot water heater that they put in. And that became the solar hot water campaign. And they did it. And they could tell you almost right at that, we brought them all together in a room like this and said, so what do you think of this? And they said, yes. And I can tell you right now how many I'm going to replace next year, because this is their job. They are the front lines of hot water. They are the front lines of solar hot water. We should work with the front lines. Yes.
Well, we did a Solarize program a couple of years ago in our community, and we had way higher than expected sign up.
Yep.
But a much lower percent than we expected of adoption after sign up. So the results were decent, but we don't know why. We don't know if the installer waited too long to follow up, or if his houses weren't appropriate, or they couldn't get financing, or it was local codes. We had no idea. And I wonder if you have thoughts about how to increase that sign-up rate, and how do you figure out why?
Yep. Yeah, and we've done a lot of that. And I can get you more detail on that after, too. I can send it to you. And the rule of thumb is you get 100 people in a room for a Solarize Solarize meeting. If 80% of them cannot get solar. 80%. So you're really, we're talking, at best, you're getting 20% who actually can. But that goes to the fact that everybody knows about solar. They want, like, oh, there's a solar meeting, I'll go. And it's like, all right, but you live in a dorm. Like, I really can't help you. Thanks for showing up. Next. So you have that. In New England, the big problem we have is tree cover. Like, there's just, great, you do have your own attached house, but you got too many trees and we just can't help you. Arizona, they got too much dust is a problem, too much sand, they got too much terracotta. It's like, all right, they got too many homeowners associations. So you have to kind of weed through these things. But the biggest mistake that happens, once someone says, I'd like to buy solar, they need a call within 24 hours, preferably within 12. They are hot to trot, and it's not unique to solar, it is because we're Americans. And it's like, I'd like solar, and by the way, I'd like it now. Like, please do it tomorrow, and if you can't do it tomorrow, forget the whole thing. Like, and it's like, wow, like, that's amazing. But this is how we buy cars now, too. It's like, it's everything. I want it now. So we literally have to be there as quickly as possible. And we are still, and by the way, and this is, and it's no fault of theirs, but it's the slowdown happens at the installer level. And that's why the multiple installer programs that we had, it just gets really messed up, because some of them are just better at it than others. And some will be like, oh great, I got 5 names, I don't need to call anybody else. And it's like, but those 20 are expecting a call, and now we just lost them. Like, it's not, it's not just about you, it's about the whole thing. Like, And so what's very interesting then is working with some of these financing companies, they do get the urgency, and so they will call right away. The problem there is actually the first call you get, you don't want it to be from a financing company. So actually we're working with some of these guys to say, well, so how do we actually, what are you comfortable saying? And, you know, because you have the call centers, or you have, you know, professional folks who can actually make these calls within hours. Will you say you're calling from Solarize, Connecticut? And can we train your finance people to talk like solar experts? And then will you pass that directly off to the solar installer? You know, so it really is, but I will send you, the numbers are dramatic on this cutoff is by the hour that they don't get talked to. It's really frustrating. Yeah.
I suspect we have a number of questions in the room, but I know you have a few slides.
Yes, thank you.
Either get through those quickly and then we'll save minutes for questions, or just...
Let me just kind of run through these. Let me run through these real quick. But I'm just going to fly through them. And basically, what I'm trying to do here is I just wanted to go deeper into some of the specifics on the campaigns, but I'm just going to fly through it because I really only have 5 minutes. But the real takeaway from this point on then is to download this study here, to download this guidebook. But to understand, you know, it's a 20-week campaign. First 4 weeks of this campaign is really the setup and understanding, getting all of your ducks in a row, getting the installers bought in, getting the communities bought in, getting the community organizations and the groups bought in. Launching the campaign becomes basically a week-long event. That's when you actually get kind of the most juice and the most excitement about the campaign. And then you're into the kind of the thick of the campaign throughout the next 6 to 19 weeks. And that's when you're working all the local fairs, the local organizations. One thing to keep in mind is we take great pains to not create our own events. And a lot of organizations will say, great, let's do an event, let's create an event. It's like, well, you know what? There's no need to. There are countless organizations in every community that have events going on all the time. And if you partner with them in the first 4 weeks, you can go to their events. You can have Solarize ambassadors and volunteers speak at their events. Think of it this way. We do so much with churches and faith communities in every single one of these campaigns. There are churches, every single weekend, they have 500 people meet. Don't go trying to recreate that. Show up. And actually, if you can get the priest, a minister, or a rabbi to talk about Solarize from the altar, that's like the voice of God talking about sun. Like, I mean, it's serious business. And you have little sign-up cards at the end of the pews, and it just works. So you can really do it. Rotary clubs, Lions Club, they all have breakfasts and lunches that you can go to. And they all want speakers. They all want, you know, people to join in. So leverage other people's events for sure. The other thing, just the last 2 weeks of the campaign then become the most important. And this is an important point. It took us, we're a marketing agency, but it took us a long time to figure this out. There is a reason why people have sales. You walk past Gap every day, or, you know, any clothing store, and then one day they say, hey, we're having a sale today, and you walk in. And it's like, wow, you could have bought the same thing yesterday, but now they have a sale, so you're going in. And basically, when you say, hey, by the way, the campaign ends tomorrow, that is a signal to people that they have to act now. And if you keep this campaign going on for 40 weeks, or 60 weeks, or 80 weeks, they're still really only going to move at the last 2 weeks. So it becomes really important to deadline this thing. Americans, we respond to deadlines. April 15th is the busiest day at the post office for a reason, because we respond to deadlines. And so make a deadline, hold to it, and actually they will all flood in. It's really, really exciting. Make sure you have kind of run this like a political campaign. If people here worked in political campaigns, if you have, you understand kind of volunteers are extremely important. The worst thing you can do to a volunteer is not give them anything to do. And they just won't work. They won't do anything else. They won't come back. So assign roles, keep people engaged and working. You build an outreach strategy the same way you would, you know, for any type of program or anything you would do at work. Working with, working with different partners in their events, putting it on a calendar. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing these programs, and this is understanding that we aren't just talking to the converted. That in fact, in a Solarize campaign, about 20% of people who do Solarize had never even considered buying solar before. And that's a magic number, because that to us is a real breakthrough number. That shows that in fact we're breaking through from kind of the truly, the true believers to really this next tier where we actually have an opportunity to really grow the solar revolution. That becomes very exciting for us. Your messaging becomes really important. Kind of, we as an industry, I'd say, have a penchant to try to tell everybody everything all the time in long, very boring paragraphs. Don't do it. Really fight against it. If you want someone to show up to an event, just get them to show up to an event. If you want them to go online, try to get them to go online. Just force them to do one thing and then get them to do the next thing and the next thing. Don't try to get them to do everything just all at the same time in your messaging, because then they wind up doing nothing. We talked a little bit about messaging before, about kind of, are you talking to them about the price? You buy it because get it because it's cheap, get it because your neighbors are doing it. Allow them to kind of make their decisions about why they're doing this. Obviously create visibility for it. The most important takeaway on this slide is that these campaigns are local, local, local. And that is part of the magic sauce here. That it happens because your peer group is you know that this is happening in your community, and you are trusting your peers because you don't know any trusted brand of solar. And so you're actually able to make this decision. I won't go deep into this, but you can kind of look at these slides afterwards. We'll have these slides all available. Different types of launch events. We really like to lean on the side of making these things kind of fun and exciting, as opposed to seminars. We have and we will do kind of solar 101s, but people who show up for a Solarize event, they want solar. They don't need to know how it works. They've already decided they want it. When someone says, I want to buy an iPhone, they don't tell them how it was made, they just sell them an iPhone. So when someone says, hey, I'm here to Solarize, like, great, here's how we're going to go Solarize. Don't tell them how it works. Don't show them how the sun works and all that. Just show them how to actually buy solar. That's really what they want to find out. How can I pay for this thing? And when can I get it on my roof? And it's like, all right. By the way, and then we've also we do some really kind of cool events in thinking outside the box, and rely on your local community supporters, your volunteers, your ambassadors to actually bring their ideas to the table too. Do not actually just walk in with kind of, well, every time we do this and then we do that and we do the other thing. Every community is different, and they will always tell you this, and it's really true. Every community outside Chicago is different than every community outside Boston. They just are. But play with that and have fun with it. We have done, outside Pittsburgh, some of the best events we've done have been at local brew pubs in Pittsburgh to Solarize, to get people to Solarize. And people will show up and we'll pack the place and have beer and trivia nights about solar trivia night, and people actually do it. One of the tough things to keep doing is actually maintain the momentum during these kind of, as we say, the long slog of the 16-week block between the launch and then the close of the campaign. And you can kind of go through this stuff later, but kind of just keep moving it and moving it. Getting people to actually endorse the campaign, local leaders to actually endorse it becomes really important. They give credibility to the campaign, they give credibility to the campaigners, and show that it actually does work. When a local mayor supports it, people may love or hate the mayor, but he or she is still the mayor. I'm done. All right, hang on. And keep going. Let me just get you right here then. These slides will be available, so you can kind of just go through this and download the slides, but really also download the guidebook, and there's the URL to do that. And then, so you have it, my contact information. And I am happy to talk and talk and talk. So anytime, call, email, and happy to help kind of move any of the work you're trying to do on all of this, because I just think it's so important. And finally, I would just say thank you for having me. And if I can take a question, I'd still take questions, or I'll be around to take questions.
And Brian, you're with us today?
I'm around today, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think we can make time for a couple of questions. I'm actually going to ask the first. It's a little two-parter. We have a number of folks in this room who are working on a community solar program.
Yep.
Creating models. Really interested in what lessons learned from Solarize you think are applicable as folks are thinking about scaling up community solar programs. And secondly, a number of people are working with institutions, in some cases colleges, universities,
Yeah.
critical facilities. Really interested in, again, what lessons learned from the residential market do you think are applicable?
Sure.
Or nonprofits as well. Or what are applicable to work with institutions?
So I'd say on the community solar piece, it's incredibly exciting because community solar is a perfect, or Solarize is perfect for a community solar campaign. And we're actually doing it in South Carolina specifically. As I just said, 80% of people who show up to a Solarize meeting can't put solar on their house. It doesn't mean they can't get solar. And so what we have done to our own fault as an industry is actually we've siloed ourselves the same way we kind of blame other industries as doing. So what we're really doing now is saying, okay, Solarize is an opportunity to give people solar in any capacity they want. So when somebody shows up and is like, oh, you know what, your house isn't right for solar, but did you know you can actually get the same economic and environmental benefits by the local community solar just down the street from you? We can help navigate you through that. And that's really what we want to do. It's actually very interesting because the local solar installers are kind of the ones we have to help move along on that path. They don't have to do the outreach on it. We will as Smart Power, but there's some yin and yang from them, as in they feel maybe we're taking away from their customer. It's like, no, you don't understand. They were never going to be a customer. So we're just kind of helping people get solar who couldn't get solar. So I really encourage any Solarize campaign should really be broadened ultimately to include anybody for solar of any kind. That really is only where it's going. And it's in South Carolina, by the way. It was actually the utility down there that was saying this is how they needed to do it. That in fact, that's where their commission was pushing them towards that. And then similarly on large institutions, colleges, we've had great success on colleges starting with energy efficiency programs of this nature. And really, if Josh is here, it was DOE actually who had challenged us years ago to do a campaign to actually get college students to actually start saving energy. They are the biggest wasters of energy, and yet they're the most motivated to actually save energy. That in fact, they believe climate change is real. They'd like to be part of the solution. They just don't know how to. And can you actually get them in their college dorm room to start saving energy? And we did it basically through a Solarize type campaign. And then you move them from saving energy to then the bigger things of buying energy for their university and putting the pressure on the university to actually buy it, or the other way around too. So, anybody else?
One or two questions for Brian before we wrap up?
All right.
All right.
Oh.
We're going to ask questions.
All right, how about that?
Thanks. Question, has this ever been used in like a small commercial space for, what are your thoughts on that?
As in small commercial for like, yeah, very much so. So, and actually we identify small businesses basically as residences, that in fact they operate much the same way. They don't have their own energy managers. They're just, if they're not mom and pop, and let's assume they're not, but they're working close to the margin, they can actually get saving money by having solar is a big deal to them. And so very much so, working on main streets, if you will, really is important to us. And it's been we've seen a lot of that actually in different towns in Rhode Island. For some reason has been a much bigger uptick for us on small businesses. But the other thing that's been very interesting is working with the large businesses and solarizing their employees. And large businesses that kind of get it will say, well, we're offering this as a benefit to our employees. So if you work here, you also now have an opportunity to get one of the best rates of solar because you work here. And we're going to make an opportunity during lunch for, a lunch and learn about solarizing Gillette, And so all the employees show up and we have one solar installer and it's a very cool opportunity. So. And that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it. Thank you guys very much. Thank you.